My name is Marcia, and I am a food addict. So I get a lot of people who ask me, how do I know that I'm a food addict or that I have some sort of food addiction? And at first I didn't. It actually took quite a bit of time for me to figure it out. And it wasn't until I started eating more of a ketogenic lifestyle that I realized that my binge eating completely stopped when I eliminated certain foods. So that was my first clue that there was something about those foods that caused me to binge eat or do things adversely that affect my weight and my health. The first thing to keep in mind is that when you have a food addiction, it has nothing to do with lack of willpower or lack of self-discipline. You can have willpower and self-discipline in many other areas of your life. And when you have a food addiction, there's other things that are happening to your body and just your chemical reactions in your body that are making you react a certain way that you literally have no control over. I obviously am not a medical professional by any means. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not a dietitian. But I would also imagine that many of your dietitians and nutritionists in your area can probably help as well. The problem, however, is that the medical society as a whole does not recognize food addiction as a true medical concern. So from a medical standpoint, there's very little resources when it comes to help with food addiction. Many medical professionals feel like it's not something that can be treated by abstaining from food. And correct, you do still have to eat. It's about learning which foods are your triggers and avoiding those foods and treating it like an addiction that way. Before you can really get into understanding what type of addiction you have to understand some of the symptoms of food addiction. And for many people, the most obvious one is overeating. And for me, it's overeating in the form of binge eating. For Ellen, hers is overeating in the form of grazing all day long. Other symptoms can include purging, undereating, obesity, which usually is tied to the overeating part of it. If you compulsively exercise, that can be another symptom of a food addiction. Obsessive thoughts about food or weight. Feelings of depression, shame, hopelessness around your body weight, your body image, and foods in general. So those are a lot of the symptoms related to food addiction. And if you feel like you have some of those symptoms, then taking the 20-question quiz might be able to help answer some of your questions if you think you have a food addiction. The hardest part that I found when it comes to dealing with a food addiction is the inability to, that's not it. With any other form of addiction, the best way to conquer that addiction is to not have any of that item. So for instance, if you're an alcoholic, you don't drink alcohol. If you have a drug addiction, you avoid those drugs. And those are much easier. Well, they're not easier. Any form of addiction, the only way to recover from it is to abstain from the item you're addicted to. When it comes to food addiction, obviously we still need food to live and survive. So the trick then becomes, how do you figure out which foods are your trigger foods that cause you to react in an addictive way? Because avoiding those foods is the only way to recover from food addiction. And it's not a temporary avoidance. It's not something that you can do for a few months and think you get over it. It is something that you have to accept as, this is an addiction, and this is something that I will need to abstain from for the rest of my life. So when you go to see any addiction specialist, they typically will have a list of questions that they're going to ask you. Typically, it's a list of 20 things or a list of 20 questions that they'll go over with you, and based on your answers, Usually if you answer yes or in the affirmative to any of the questions, then you have some sort of addiction to whatever it is that you're seeking help with. I'm not going to go over each question in detail. In fact, I'm just going to leave a link down below for all the questions so that if you guys want to take the quiz to learn to see if maybe you have some sort of food addiction, follow the link below to hopefully get some answers for yourself. If you guys want me to go over what my results were, when I took the quiz, I ended up with 15 of them being a yes answer as to some sort of indication that I am a food addict. So again, I had a yes answer to 15 of the questions. And honestly, since I've started my journey or restarted my journey on March 2nd, I have not had one single binge episode we're now over 5 months now. And I used to binge at least once a day before I started eliminating the foods that are my trigger foods. For me, my trigger foods, I know people have asked this question as well. My trigger foods are pasta, breads, cakes, and any sort of processed carb like that. Breads and pastas being the top of the list for me. For Ellen, she's a grazer, so she didn't necessarily binge eat. Hers was more about grazing, and often grazing on sugars, so candies like Swedish Fish, Sour Patch Kids, stuff like that. So we both have a food addiction. Her trigger foods are different than mine. So going on this journey together, it's helped both of us. So like I said, 0 binges for me in over 5 months. And as of this morning, I am down 70 pounds in 5 months. So that's amazing. And Ellen is down 54 pounds too. So anyway, is there help out there for you? Yes, there is. There's Overeaters Anonymous, there's Food Addicts in Recovery Anonymous, and there's a bunch of other groups out there as well that can help give you a place to go and get the help that you need, and even just talk with other people who are in the same situation that you are to help deal with these feelings that you're having, or if you fall off the wagon and you need help getting back on track. I hope this information is helpful to you guys. If you want me to go over the questions in detail so that you guys can know my answers and how my food addiction has affected my life, I would be happy to do that. Just leave a comment down below to let me know. I appreciate you all so much, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.